Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Transit Report on Monday, July 15th. Before we jump into the chart for today, I do want to go back just for a moment to the new moon chart. On Saturday, we had our first quarter moon, and we'll be having our full moon of this lunar cycle on Sunday of this week. So, in light of that, I just wanted to pull a couple things forward from the Cancer new moon back on July 5th. As you guys know, I love to look at the thematics of the new moon to try to get a sense of the overall month. And we're still having just passed that quarter moon. We're still in a very high lunar energetic quality as she's growing in illumination every day to the full moon that we'll have in Capricorn, which will actually be our second full moon in a row in the sign of Capricorn. That happens, every so often. We'll get a full moon in the same sign, but it's fairly rare. But back at this Cancer new moon, just to remind us a couple of things from this chart. And Venus was pretty closely conjunct in the sign of Cancer. So when we think of Cancer, this is the cardinal water sign. It is the home sign of the moon herself. So it's always a very powerful lunar cycle, kicking off with her having her new moon in her own sign. We think of Cancer, we think of the crab. We think of sensitivity, the home, comfort, security, both in our home and our family, but also inner security. The moon does represent our inner world. And so, yeah, just a lot of sensitivity. Uh, and putting Venus there really adds to that. Venus, the planet of our passions and values and what we want in this life, that feeling of tranquility and harmony. So all of that, those things there really brought this Cancerian feeling to the new moon. And to add a little bit of extra sensitivity to the month, Venus was also square to Chiron at the new moon. And Venus was in gate 62, where we'll see the sun is currently at today, with the sun traveling just behind her. She was in gate 62 at the new moon, squaring Chiron in gate 42. So this is really bringing that Chironic story to the theme of this month. And Venus square Chiron, yeah, but anytime we have a hard aspect to Chiron, we're feeling some sort of trigger, some sort of sensitivity as well. Chiron's in the gate of growth. So this has been a longer, larger story we have been sharing week to week of how we are developing in this cycle of emotional experience in the channel of maturation where Chiron is. And that has also been connected to the story of Saturn in gate 22. Saturn is still retrograde in the gate of grace, offering this ability to review and possibly restructure or fortify. I'm really trying to think of structural, foundational terms of how we express our own personal, deep emotional energy in context of with others, the channel of openness, the design of a social being and interaction with others. And so Saturn really giving us some work to do here. And at the new moon, Mars was exactly sextile to that Saturn. So bringing that story in as well. And then if we look at the body graph, things to notice are that in the root center, all three of the individual circuitry gates were activated because the moon and the sun were conjunct in gate 39, line 6, which puts the Earth in its polarity in gate 38, and Pluto in that gate 60. So we can really see this incredible stimulation at our root center, driving us and stimulating our personal individual activations wherever you may have them. Now, as you all have been hearing me say, lunar cycle after lunar cycle, every new moon this year has been overwhelmingly individually oriented. Every new moon, we've either had only an individual channel. There was 2 new moons where there was no channel defined, but the moon was in individual gates. So it's been really just an extraordinary pattern to uncover, looking at the cycles of each new moon. So while there's been incredible world news craziness going on, all the challenges of the planet, the transits have really been guiding us inward into our own personal story of individuality. themes such as what is my inner truth? What is my personal inspiration? What is my purpose in life? And how am I evolving and healing from my own personal chironic journey into that integration of the inner world with the outer world? And I think that's what I'm really seeing in the body graph. When we look at those three individual gates stimulated, we also have two individual throat gates because we have Uranus and Mars. Well, Mars at the new moon was still in gate 23. Was in gate 8. I'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, Mars in gate 23, and then Uranus in gate 8. But yet we have also this collective channel of the wavelength, the design of talent, expressing depth and solutions in a skillful way. This channel really speaks to refinement, sharing over and over whatever that experience is, but smoothing it out, making it refined in that sense. So, and then we also had at the new moon all three of the logical expression gates. Gate 31, where Mercury was at the new moon, Jupiter in that gate 16, and Venus in gate 62. So we see this heavily stimulated individual chart, yet on the other end of it, we've got all these collective expression gates. So I felt like this cycle is somehow about this transition, integration, something going on in our inner world, and how are we telling our story in the outer world? So from there, let's take a quick look at the first quarter moon. Now, this was on Saturday, so just 2 days ago. Every first quarter moon is when the moon is square the sun. And so that's why it has such a dynamic emotional energy. The two luminaries squared off in an aspect promoting growth and development as she grows in illumination each day. And what we can see from the first quarter moon is that we had that Mars-Uranus conjunction getting very tight. In fact, I'll say more on that in a moment when I get to today's chart. That conjunction was exact at 8 o'clock this morning. But that was very much in effect. Venus had just been opposite Pluto. And so, this is bringing this Venus opposite Pluto could be personal, our personal Venus, or it could also indicate relationships. But whatever that meaning of Venus was in your own story, the opposition to Pluto was offering this indication that there could be hidden truths. There could be something to be discovered that we were yet unaware of. And again, Pluto in gate 60, it's tied to this idea of our personal limitations. Anywhere we may be sensing fear, doubt, or insecurity, at this first quarter moon, there may have been some interaction with others that maybe stimulated or triggered us to try to dig deeper. What am I missing here? I feel like right now, this period of time that is overwhelmingly sensitive, as I said, where little things could really touch a nerve more than other times, that when that happens, this is a great time to stop, breathe, regulate, and ask myself, what is there for me to learn right here? With an opposition like this, the natural tendency is to project onto the other. It's their fault, their problem, the world's problem. It's really easy to lose sight of where the frequency is pointing us is at ourself. It reminds me of that expression, when you point your finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I think that's what all of these individual activations are sharing with us, is that there's possible deep chironic growth in the offering if we can focus on how we're evolving, where we're finding our self-empowerment, where we're using our Cancerian theme of this time period to find our own inner security, to look at our boundaries in our relationships, to let go of things that are no longer serving us, to add things that self-nourish us. A lot of self-nourishment can be super helpful during this deeply sensitive lunar cycle. We also saw at the first quarter moon, we had the channel of the Alpha, a design of leadership for good or bad. Venus in gate 31, Mercury in gate 7, 2 very personal planets for all of us. in a logical channel of direction into the future. So the channel of the wavelength logical, channel of the alpha, how is this inner work that we're going through, how is that now being possibly shared out in a very authentic and aligned way? The moon herself at the first quarter was in gate 32. This is the channel of transformation. So I think she's bringing us this energy of having the awareness to recognize what needs to be transformed. And so getting all of that thematic with this incredible blast of this growing Mars-Uranus conjunction. Okay, so let's take all of that. That was the new moon, the first quarter moon, and take that to where we are today on Monday, July 15th. So the sun, as I mentioned, in gate 62, the earth in gate 61. Now, just after 8 o'clock this morning, at 8:04 a.m. Mountain Time is when this Mars-Uranus conjunct was exact. This is an explosive energy. Mars, the god of war, the fiery red planet with all its zeal and energy. I mean, we all can get a sense of this red planet lining up with Uranus. I call the wild card in the deck of planets. I mean, just something out of nowhere. Things can change direction suddenly. It has a quality very much like lightning. So taking these two planets, putting them directly together in a conjunction, we can really get this incredible energy here. It was really striking and unfortunate. We had a assassination attempt on our former President Donald Trump on Saturday. That certainly would have been tied to this conjunction. And in fact, in his chart, this is hitting his midheaven, so it hit him personally, obviously, but also really wild that this is also conjunct a star called Algol. If you guys have watched any other astrological videos, this has been in the astrological news leading up to this conjunction, and it was just so strange because Algol has to do with the Greek mythology of Medusa, and it represents Medusa's eye. And it has this thematic of decapitation. It's part of the mythological story was their head was cut off. And so the fact that he was shot, hit in the ear like that, it was just so wild when you see something in the external world that so incredibly and exactly matches the mythology of the astrological frequency. But that was one thing, and we'll see what else may come. And when we have something with this large of an energetic frequency happening, I would expect stories we may see for the coming several weeks have to do with this energy. But now if we tie it into our personal body graph, this happened in gate 8, the gate of contribution. So another heavy duty activation in individual circuitry. Again, it's like this drumbeat, this steady rhythmic drumbeat of activations, important aspects happening in our individual circuitry. It was in line 2, or it is in line 2, of the line of service, which is actually a very beautiful line in the Rei Vi Qing. It speaks to this idea of selfless contribution. Line 2 is the natural in the hexagram. It's purest natural expression of the archetype of the gate. And it's a very unselfish line. It speaks to the idea that for true inspiration to be shared in the world, it has to be line 1 of gate 8, which is honesty, and then there's this selflessness quality to it. So I think in that sense, it's a very powerfully beautiful conjunction, even though it got a lot of negative press in the astrological world due to this Algol conjunction, but still something for all of us to contemplate, how this really powerful energy in gate 8 is stimulating the rest of our individual gates and channels. And then interestingly, right after the conjunction was exact at 8 a.m., shortly after that, the moon moved into gate 1 in Scorpio. And so today we can see for the better part of the day, we have the channel of inspiration, the creative role model. So whatever stimulation may have come over the weekend, this would be a beautiful day to tap into this individual circuit group energy that we carry. What we're feeling has been our own healing journey, and what inspiration may come from that. We still have a deeply sensitive frequency, though. Not only are we still talking the Cancer new moon I was describing, but today the sun is square that Chiron. So when we see the life force energy lining up in a hard aspect with Chiron, this can give a feeling of lack of confidence, the uncertainty, which individual gates already do. But here with the sun in this square, again, it's really stimulating that storyline. How are we being healed? Where have we been poked or prodded through someone, an interaction with someone, or an experience that's going on out there? And what are we learning from that? What's that adding to the story? Um, So this again, this Mars-Uranus conjunction, it's in the background for the entire week. And so let's break it down day by day, and we'll see some other aspects come in that sort of help paint the picture of where we're going as we head towards the full moon next Sunday. So let's go to Tuesday, July 16th. On Tuesday, the moon still in Scorpio is now directly opposite that Mars-Uranus conjunction, right? So we can, again, feel this deep emotional stimulation with this gate 8. The moon herself is in gate 14 tomorrow. Again, another individual gate. But I think, again, it's asking us, how does this energy get integrated? Where have we experienced some sort of unusual shock, stimulation, anything of that nature, rather than getting lost out there in the external world, getting lost in the news feed cycle? Where can I go inward to find this inner regulation and tranquility and focus on, I keep feeling like the phrase I want to say is, how do I stay in my lane right now? Really easy with this much sensitivity to get overly stimulated and to either lash out or get into someone else's lane, to interfere with somebody else's process, to remember that everybody is being affected and infected with these frequencies. So, we can see how things can really get off kilter out there, I think, in the external world that we live in. And also on Tuesday, let's see, actually, I think what's going to, let me go to the next day, I think here. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention on Tuesday that's happening. This will be a longer story that I'll keep coming back to, but from Tuesday into Wednesday, Mercury in Leo is entering what we call his shadow. So in other words, he's already slowing down and preparing for retrograde, which will happen on August 4th. And then he'll be retrograde until August 28th. He'll turn forward and not be out of his shadow until September 11th. So between 21 degrees Leo and 4 degrees Virgo, if you have anything in that area of the chart, or also if you had them, Leo's a fixed fire, so anything, well, including this Mars-Uranus conjunction, that's in fixed Taurus, so that conjunction is going to be very much part of this Mercury retrograde cycle, and any other fixed signs within those degrees, those latter degrees of fixed signs, that this mercurial retrograde phase, there's going to be more to learn, right? This Mercury will go over this territory of the wheel from 21 Leo to 4 degrees Virgo 3 times. So between now and September 11th, there's going to be a developing story that we really won't be possibly clear on until we get till September 11th. So I'll come back to that as that story develops over that timeline, but that is something to note here on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, Mercury is now on Wednesday going to trine that Chiron. So Mercury in gate 4. So here with the planet of communication trining Chiron, whatever that trigger was we may have experienced over the weekend, or when clear back to when Venus was square Chiron at the new moon, there may be some movement here. If we've done some work, if we've done all that hard work, the self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, the acceptance that Pluto is trying to help us learn, right? The planet of death, rebirth, and transformation in the gate of limitations. However, we've been working with that energy. There's some opportunity for some movement here, for some growth. Maybe a gate 4 is the formula, right? So maybe there's something to communicate very logically that we've learned. Because as I mentioned, I feel like this month is about how do we take the inner development and change our story, right? The sun is in gate 62. And I think it's very interesting to think about gate 62 being in the sign of Cancer. Again, this is a mental, logical expression gate. So when we think logical circuitry, it's associated with the splenic awareness center. So it tends to be rather non-emotional. It's very kind of cold or cool because it's coming from the spleen. It's here to help keep us alive. And so gate 62 has that logical, colder, analytical feeling, but it's in the deeply sensitive, emotional sign of Cancer. And so I just wanted to highlight that because we've got the sun in gate 62, line 6 on Wednesday, and then tomorrow, we'll get to that in a second, the sun goes into gate 56. So we have two collective gates of expression. And so as this storyline of individual development is going on for each of us, how we're sharing in our communications, really important to listen to what we're saying. We get so attached to these old storylines, early childhood, who was at fault, who didn't love us enough, who didn't support us. And those are very real pains and possibly traumatic experiences. But if we've gone through all this inner growth and development this year, which has just been, as I said, a fierce drumbeat, this opportunity now with these expression gates and all these other powerful energies behind them that we're going through, I think as we listen in our sharings, if we say something that doesn't align with our new inner emotional development, we want to note that. Like I've caught myself saying something that really sounded like my old story, and I just wanted to stop and say, that is not how I want to say that anymore. That is not my truth anymore. There has been growth and development, and this is a more higher frequency to share. And so I think that's part of the mix with gate 62 and gate 56 coming. And gate 62, again, back to that Cancer idea. I mean, it really speaks to how important details are when it comes to our inner security, even our home comfort and security. The details like our bed, right? Having your favorite pillow, your favorite blanket. And if we have everything set up, we sleep better. And you can kind of carry that all the way through our daily life. These details are incredibly important that we get the right pattern so that it supports our emotional growth and sensitivity in that sense. So I think very interesting location for gate 62. Also on Wednesday, that sun in gate 62, it'll be in 56 on the next slide, but starting to form a sextile with that Mars-Uranus conjunction. They're both still in gate 8, but we can see how with Mars slowly moving faster than Uranus, we're getting quite the breadth of gate 8. Uranus will be in line 2, but we'll see Mars each day move a little further through that gate 8. So we're feeling this, again, this stimulation, maybe support of how this story of our own individual contribution may be growing. And we can see quite a few other soft aspects. Again, the Mercury was trine Chiron, and the moon on Wednesday is forming a trine and a sextile with the nodal axis. And so, again, the storyline can be changing. The moon in Sagittarius is also bringing quite a bit of hope and optimism from the sign of Sagittarius. And let's go ahead and go into Thursday. And as I mentioned, we can see the sun has moved into gate 56, the gate of stimulation. This is another collective gate of expression but this one is in sensing circuitry. This is part of our abstract frequency. This is where we have this storytelling gate. What is our story? We have been through so much this year. How has our story developed? It's part of the channel of curiosity. In gate 11, this gate 11 is the gate of ideals and visions and the Sagittarian hope of the future and what's possible. And so I think this is, again, a lovely gate for the sun right now to tell a new story. Not an easy story. The Earth is moved into gate 60 in its polarity to 56. So it's also conjunct that Pluto in gate 60. And as we move towards the full moon, you'll see how there's a real interesting story developing over the next couple days here. But again, on Thursday, we see this grand fire trine between Chiron, Mercury, and the moon. And so this is showing that there's support here, something in that mercurial planet of communication and the sun in the gate of stimulation. There's an opportunity through this stimulating Mars, Uranus, incredible explosive energy to move this story forward. How is what I feel my selfless inspiration of contribution to the whole, what does that look like? How is that working right now? Now, that grand trine is happening on Thursday. Now, what's happening in the background of that, coming on the heels of that as we head towards the full moon, is that Pluto and Neptune are forming a sextile with each other. Pluto in gate 60 at 0 degrees Aquarius, Neptune at 29 degrees 51 minutes at the very end here of Pisces in gate 25. And then that Mars down there conjunct Uranus, by tomorrow, it's going to move into 29 degrees, and we're going to get this trine between Mars and Pluto and Neptune at the apex of that. So let me go ahead and show that. But I just wanted to mention this is also building this story as we go to the full moon. So here's Friday, and you can see that Mars in that 29 degrees of Taurus is very close to the exact trine to Pluto. Now, the Pluto-Mars aspects have also been very evident in the world news. When Mars has been square Pluto, the first square was on October 7th when the Hamas-Israel war started. And then when Mars was conjunct Pluto and then formed the next square, there were some big events happening. Now, so we'll see what happens here, not only in the world news, but also individually. But the idea being that here we have these very powerful planets, Mars and Pluto, but forming a trine. So trines always indicate support, they're flowing, there's something working together. They're in harmony in that sense with each other. And it's important that Neptune is at the apex of that triangle with the sextiles there. So Neptune in gate 25 really being sort of the linchpin. So here we have gate 25, the gate of the spirit of the higher self. All of this incredible stimulation going on from all these planets, but in these last couple days, a lot of supportive aspects. How is our frequency of that? How whatever initiation we've been going through this year, at some level, how has that affected what we feel as our spirit of the higher self? So there's definitely a story of not only gate 42 chironic evolutionary journey going on for each of us, but this idea of higher self G center. So, when I see a chart like this, I just think of my G center and just kind of want to touch it, put our hand there, put our attention where our attention goes, energy flows. And so, again, just that message of how am I doing internally? Where am I feeling any fear, doubt, insecurity, uncertainty? These would be natural feelings right now due to all of the individual activations, but yet we can use that as a learning prompt, whether whatever we can do, create through our creativity. That's the other word I really want to emphasize with these transits, is that it's really pushing us towards our individual creativity, which I think is the kryptonite to the fear, doubt, and insecurity. So a lot of support in regards to that, what's possible with that story, I think. And then we'll go into Saturday, and actually it's on Friday. Let me just back up one second. On Friday, we have a nodal shift. and that happens right after this chart. All my charts are for noon Mountain Time, but at 12:26 p.m. Mountain Time, so 26 minutes after this chart, we have our nodal shift. So when I go into Saturday, you'll see that the north node has moved into gate 17, line 6, the south node into gate 18, line 6. The nodes always travel in retrograde, so they always start at line 6 and work their way down to line 1. They're the only celestial body in these charts that are always in retrograde. So that alone is kind of an interesting contemplation on how these nodes work with the rest of the wheel. But here we're getting this very logical frequency, right? Gate 18 in the splenic awareness center is the gate of correction. It's the instinctual, intuitive awareness from ancient history, right? Spleen is our oldest awareness center. This is part of our genetic coding to figure out how to improve the pattern based on health, wellness, and sustainability. So this gate 18 brings this incredible awareness to correct things. But anyone that has this gate, like I do, always remember it's all about strategy. This is a projector energy. It's in a projector channel. So it's really, you got to think about that. You want to follow strategy when it comes to correcting things. But here, just want to mention, that south node in gate 18 and the north node in gate 17 also in logical circuitry in the gate of opinions. So we, with the nodal frequency carrying these two powerful, I mean, the north node's still in Aries. It could be, we're going to see a lot of this in the news. And it's lower vibration. This is a lot of finger pointing, right? People get all caught up and attached to their opinions. So in that sense, it could be a bit of to navigate this. We really want to stay in our lane again, really focus on our internal regulation and not get too caught up in all these opinions that are going to be flying out there. And we certainly know in the United States with our election coming, it's going to be a little overbearing. But at any rate, back to the overall chart here. That was the big news on Saturday. And again, you can see that Mars trine Pluto really strong, and even those sextiles with Neptune are growing as well. And on Saturday as well, we've got the moon sextiling Saturn. So continuing to bring this restructuring cycle of development that Saturn is doing for all of us in this emotional gate of expression. And boy, do we need that, right? I mean, we can just see the divisive nature of the world right now. We are not handling emotions well on a collective scale. And so hopefully as Saturn does this slow march backwards in gate 22 and eventually forward, we all have the opportunity to grow and develop maturity in our emotional interaction with others. So one of the main thematics of this current period of time. So let me wrap it up here by going to Sunday. And that's when we have our full moon, which takes place at 4:17 a.m. on Sunday morning, Mountain Time. And wow, this is powerful here. So let's break this down a little bit. There's a lot of strong aspects, and whenever these aspects are in the same degree, it certainly adds the strength, the energetic frequency that we're witnessing. So we have the sun at 29 degrees Cancer and the moon at 29 degrees Capricorn. Well, in astrology, the last degree of every astrological sign is called the anaretic degree. You can think of it sort of like the final chapter of that sign. And so it brings an extra intensity, right? Because as soon as it goes to the next degree, we're going into a whole different story. And so they're always in the final degrees is something that brings an extra energetic push to finish something, to figure something out before those planets move on. And so we're getting the final degree of Cancer, this sign, as I've talked about, which is inner security, our home security, our sensitivity and our emotions, all the things that tie up with the moon and her lunar frequency in our life. that's where we started with the new moon. And now the moon's in Capricorn at 29 degrees. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. It's associated with the 10th house. And in a nutshell, it really represents how we expose ourselves to the outer world, right? How it's often associated with vocation, but even if it's not career or work, it's just how we kind of shine our energy out in public. And so that's part of that storyline I was saying about integrating your inner story. How's it being told in the outer story? And so that's still happening with the sun in gate 56. How are we hearing ourselves tell this story? And as you can see, it's a very tightly conjunct Pluto. So it's bringing Pluto and the moon together at the full moon. Wow, this is a deep full moon. And it's got some really supportive aspects because that Pluto is exactly 0 degrees Aquarius and Mars at 0 degrees Gemini. It's exactly trying to that Mars, having fresh come off the conjunction with Uranus. Uranus is also pulled into that trine because it's only a little 3 or 4 degrees away from that. And then both of those energies are sextile to that Neptune in gate 25. So yeah, it has this deeply spiritual quality with Neptune being the ruler of Pisces, Neptune being the planet of limitlessness, right? Neptune is beyond the boundary of Saturn. Anything is possible in our imaginations, our creativity, our spirituality. At a lower frequency, it can be a little delusional, though. And I think we'll see that for sure. People are kind of losing their heads in that sense over all the stuff going on out there. But taking it to a personal level, deep support for inner spiritual growth. And when I say spiritual, I'm really thinking G-center spirit, how this initiation may have taken us through the ring of fire and how we can evolve, how we can let go maybe of some of our lower self ego motives to move into our highest frequency of the G-center higher self of love, direction, and identity. And how this inner story gets told now. How are we moving into this new expression of pure, selfless inspiration? Um, Also, want to add in that Mercury in Leo, Mercury in gate 29, is square Uranus. So it's connecting it to that electrifying Uranian energy of gate 8. So here we have Mercury, the planet of communication, stimulating and dynamic growth, that Uranus still in that gate 8. So there's just a real dynamic, feels evolutionary. It feels very growth oriented, very supported, but it's so deep, right? And I'm speaking about Pluto now. We've got some supportive aspects overall, but man, it's just that individual circuitry. I mean, it's the deepest inner core of our soul's journey, right? So because it's so deep, even with soft aspects, doesn't mean it's always an easy ride. But I think that's where our attention, our focus, our perspective, if we're on self-creativity, it's incredibly powerful, even though we're going to be up against this rather challenging, opinionated, corrective energy of the world trying to move us in the direction it wants us to go. We've got to stand our ground. Whatever that is, whatever that means to us, it's really about being within our expression, this Capricornian full moon, at the moon at her zenith of illumination. How have we gone through this journey over these last 2 weeks through the sensitivity and the chironic stimulation? How can we have this really integrated, authentic, inspirational, selfless expression to whatever path we're taking on towards our own self-creativity? Okay, I think I'm going to stop my sharing there and would love to hear from you guys. I wasn't really looking at the chat, so let me take a breath and a sip of water, and love to hear anything you guys would like to talk about. Oh yeah, I love that now. I love that. That's cute. And could I speak more about Uranus being the wild card versus a sidetrack? Yeah, so Uranus, even when we look at Uranus from an astronomical point of view, it's a very unusual planet. For one thing, Uranus spins on its side. Like all the planets, like Earth is sort of tilted, right? And we all rotate. But all the planets are generally have a North Pole and a South Pole that's, up straight up and down, or at least tilted. Uranus, its North and South Pole is completely vertical in that sense. Like it spins like a bowling ball or whatever, with the poles pointing out each side. It has a very unusual elliptic. It actually, at one point in its cycle, will actually come inside the orbit of Saturn, and then it goes all the way out. It's got everything about it astronomically is different. And so as we carry that into the mythology of Uranus, it just has this really unusual, unpredictable, right? And so it's not, it certainly does not have a what we might consider good or bad connotation. It just is surprising. It's like one storyline could be going one way, and all of a sudden Uranus gets involved and it's going the other direction. Like it just doesn't seem to make sense. And so I say wild card because in a game of cards, if you have a wild card, that's kind of what happens to the game. Everybody's got a strategy on what their hand is and what's showing, the face card showing. And all of a sudden a wild card gets laid on the table, and now everything changes. Everybody's strategy, what you thought you had, is no longer is the same. And so it just brings this, again, this out of the box, who the heck knew that was going to happen? So that's really how I would describe the general frequency. Sidetracked, and maybe you can share more if I'm hearing you wrong, but to me, sidetracked could be part of that, right? Think something happens so unusual that we lose focus. I mean, surprise can do that. It can be startling, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be sidetracked. But it can. It can be so unusual and stimulating, in that sense. It could be a sidetrack, but I don't think we could make it an overriding generalization all the time. Or maybe we could. I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts. Was I hearing you correctly now? Oh, you're saying in HD. Actually, I don't know. I guess maybe Ross said that on one of his recordings, if that's where you're getting that. I mean, the main keynote in human design is unusualness. I mean, that's at least what they have in the definitive book of human design, I think. But anyhow, I think we're in the same vein, if you will. I think sidetrack um, can happen because it is so unusual. We all can be just walking down the street and something unusual really all of a sudden we're focused on it when we were going this way. So it can have that element. But I think that's why it's fun to play with these keynotes, to really dig deeper into the frequency so that we have more of a richer vocabulary in that sense to really connect with these qualities. Uranus, is so bonded to the human design system. I mean, it's when Uranus was discovered that we had the nine-centered being created, right? We are the Homo sapien interregnum, and that was all based on the discovery of Uranus. And when the shift in 2027 happens, well, that's a result of the fact that Pluto, where it was when Uranus was discovered in 1781, once Pluto makes its full revolution around the sun, which takes 248 years, that is 2027. And we live on a Uranian life cycle, right? The average lifespan is 84 years long. So there's all these Uranian, I mean, this is a Uranian science essentially too. So we can really sense the Uranian frequency throughout the entire human design system. It also is unusual. It's new, it's innovative, it's creative. All of these are Uranian keynotes. So it's just got a deep Uranian mythology built into this system. Yeah, please now go ahead.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there, but yes, that does answer my question. I think I was trying to get more of an idea of how to keynote Uranus in the first place and what the differences might be between astrology in general and human design's take on it. I think the sidetrack, if I'm not mistaken, comes from the resonance mapping. I might be mistaken on that, but I was just I'd never heard Uranus being called a wild card or a joker before, so I was curious
Oh,
about
that
that.
I made that one up.
Yeah, yeah. I like
That's a
it.
Richard Corbett keynote.
I like
Um,
it.
but I love what you're sharing, which is that when we look at planets and we look at the frequency, the mythology, all of this body of knowledge that we might give to a planet, that is one thing that is very similar. I don't think there's any difference. And when we look at a planet, mythology, frequency, and astrology, we can apply the same thing to human design. Now, when Ra came out with all this, he was not into astrology and he was very adamant about making sure everybody knew this was not astrology. And it's true. I mean, it is totally different systems. And I never treat them as though they're integrated into one. I use both. But I look at them from my perspective as though I'm looking at two systems, but where's the correlation? And I think astrology is really helpful when it comes to transits. Not so helpful compared to human design because it doesn't have the design calculation, right? When we look at the astrology, they only take the time of birth frequency of planets, not so that just to point out how different human design and astrology, completely different systems. But when it comes to the planets, we can learn a lot from our astrological knowledge of thousands of years of people observing the frequency of these planets. And I think we can really, in a helpful way, take that information and apply it to the body graph to go beyond Ra's one-word keynotes. I mean, again, in the definitive book of human design, every planet gets one keynote, like Mars, immaturity. Well, that's not the full story. Yes, immaturity is related to Mars. Yes, we all have been at some point and maybe ongoing immature where we see our Mars, but it's not the full story. There's the drive, the energy to get things done, this passion, zeal, energetic push to go out into life. That's all part of the Mars story. So I just like to add because I think it brings depth and nuance when we're looking at our own body graph or any chart, and we look at that planet, understanding the mythology that we each carry. We all have a mythological story of each of these planets that we're living out. It really takes us to a different nuance in the body graph. But really excellent point I think you're pointing out. And I think it's important that we all kind of do discover words that mean something to us. I mean, my journey with each of these planets will be different than each of your journeys. So accumulating your own connection, your own personal relationship with these planets, to me, is profound. These are the imprinting agents of our chart. And again, I just feel like it wasn't part of Ra's mission to, when he brought this system into the world, to get into that topic. He said many times, look, I'm focused on this part of the foundation. Other people will do this. And that's why we see human design branching out into so many different little modules of investigation. And I think this is a supportive one here to recognize there's a whole deeper story to these planets than the one word keynote, because it's really important that we have this deeply personal connection to these planets as again, because they are what actually creates the chart. I mean, yeah, that's why I call them imprinting agents. So that just to try to lend a visual of how deep inside of us these planets are and to understand the full nature of their story and frequency can really illuminate other things in our own incarnation path journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
I Yeah, this is really helpful for me because I'm coming to astrology through human design, so I don't quite have that foundation just yet.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I'm going right now, and your transit reports have really been helpful in that regard. As okay, the planets, the frequency, the archetypes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and what does it mean for the human experience? And you can't underestimate that as, if you want to call it an imprinting force. Definitely uh, underappreciated in human design historically, but you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for all that, and always happy to be of support. And I too was deeply involved in human design for 10 years before I ever even looked at astrology, and before I had an astrology reading or even read a book. But through a series of events in my life where I went through some real heavy duty crisis, I actually inadvertently got an astrology reading from an incredible astrologer. And what he shared with me actually blew my mind. And so that's why I was like, wait a minute here. There's more I want to understand. And so that's how I personally got into it. But I would say, in short, I use astrology with the human design system, much like a photographer uses lighting. So to me, human design is the end all. I just think it's the greatest system ever. I mean, I've looked at it from every which way for 2.5 decades. It's just so deep and profound. But when I take astrology and shine it around the body graph from all these different angles, again, as you shared, the archetype, the frequency, the house, the sign, when you add all of that to the planet and the gate and the line, all of a sudden the story, the texture, the contours of the body graph illuminate in that sense. So that's why my analogy, a photographer uses light on the subject. The subject is the body graph. But if you shine the astrological light around the body graph, it's like holographic illumination of messages appear. And so that's why I have found them supportive. But as you hear me sharing, I think it's really important when you're starting this journey using both of them to remember that there's going to be certain things that don't align. They're different systems. So not all of it is actually perfectly uh, linked because it is a different system. But there are a lot of things that are very supportive in that regard. Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for your lovely comment, and thanks for being here. And now, did you have anything else you wanted to share, or yeah, anyone?
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.